share my screen again and we can move on to our next presentation. And that presentation is Wrangling Counter Usage Reports for ACRL and IPEDS, presented by Ilda Cardenas, who's the Electronic Resources Librarian at Pollock Library, California State University, Fullerton. She manages access to the library's electronic content. She received her MLIS from San Jose State University. Previously to working at Fullerton, she was an Electronic Resources and Acquisitions Librarian at Mississippi State University Libraries. Ilda's research interests include usage statistics, issues in electronic resources management, and employee wellness. So thank you for being here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and you can take it away as soon as you are ready.
Okay, let me share my screen. Let me hide my meeting controls and get to my presentation. Okay. Thank you all for your interest in attending my presentation today. I will be talking about wrangling counter usage reports for ACRL IPEDS. Again, a little bit about me. I'm your presenter. I'm Ilda Cardenas. I work at Cal State Fullerton. I'm the Electronic Resources Librarian. And when I'm not troubleshooting broken links, I am collecting usage statistics. And I'll be touching on a few points in my presentation. I will start with the age-old question of whether or not to harvest usage statistics via SUSHI or directly from the vendor. I will show you what code I've written so far to aid in my usage statistics workflow. And I'll end with a discussion about the use of artificial intelligence to write my code. So let's get started. Counter stands for Counting Online User Network Electronic Resources. It's a way to reliably count the use of electronic journals, ebooks, and other electronic media. All of my talk will be based off of journal usage reports. What do we use counter reports for? Well, we use them for collection development decisions. And we use counter reports because they're a reliable metric. They apply across all platforms. And we incorporate this data into our decision making. And a little bit about our collection development practices at Cal State Fullerton. We have a collection development librarian and a collection development team. And the team meetings is where we make a lot of the collection development decisions for the library. For these collection development decisions, they come throughout the year, but our biggest report is created in the summer when our Horaciewicz managed subscriptions come up for renewal. And when I collect the usage statistics for the Horaciewicz, since I've already collected a lot of the usage data, I end up reusing that for IPEDS. And IPEDS, ACRL IPEDS, is a federally mandated report, and a couple of the questions asked for us to report usage across all electronic collection platforms. My overall goal is to minimize the times I go in to collect usage data, whether it's throughout the year or after Horaciewicz renewals. Unfortunately, this year, at the beginning of summer, I collected TRJ1 counter reports, and realized that ACRL IPEDS instructions lean towards a TRJ3. And you might be wondering why I'm collecting counter reports directly from the vendor. I come from a library that has access to a SUSHI client. It's a way to automatically retrieve counter reports across many platforms. But working in an ex libris SUNYLA environment, harvesting these SUSHI reports is very tedious, and I lack the motivation and knowledge to harvest these reports that way. It takes a lot of troubleshooting. It's just been a very slow process. In my mind, the process for SUSHI seems duplicative and time consuming, because you're supposed to make sure the reports are running properly every year and getting the data to behave for what I want it to do. For harassment renewals is not easy this way. And I'll explain this later. More importantly, I don't use SUSHI because I wait until the last minute to collect my usage reports. So it leaves very little time to try something new. I know this is bad, but I'm comfortable with it. I also assume that there are libraries out there that don't have a SUSHI client. So what I'll be talking about today will be helpful to somebody. And now I have a little screenshot of all my counter reports, how they all look in their folder. Collecting counter reports is just easier for me. So I'll be focusing the rest of my presentation on what I do with all this data. Annually, I'm supposed to collect usage reports from about 50 different vendors. I'll start discussing the harassment workflow to show you how some of my code was written, because it eventually helps me with ACRL IPEDS. And before I move on from this screen, I want to point out that some of these files end with CSV, TSV, and XLSX. So Harassowitz is our subscription manager. They do a lot of the minutia of like managing our one-off journal subscriptions. And from the files that I've collected in my previous slide, I'm supposed to fit all this data, all the counter data, into this spreadsheet. And there are a few things wrong. This spreadsheet is organized by journal title and not by vendor platform. In the past, in order to enter usage data into the spreadsheet, I had to guess where I'd find the journal usage among all 50 counter reports. And talk about inefficient. For someone like me that wasn't at all familiar with the library's electronic collection, I had no idea where things lived. And I believe that there's a better way to do this. So bear with me while I show you more screenshots. So a little bit about my code. It was written using pandas. Pandas is built on top of the Python programming language to help with data analysis. If you look closely, you can see that my code is reading in counter reports regardless of file format. Counter reports come in a variety of file formats. Although the reports all look the same, you need to read in the data a different way. So you can see this is for my TSV, This is for my Excel spreadsheets. And then there's one a little below for my CSV. I'm also automating the reading of all this data. I may be doing it by file format, but I'm reading in several files at the same time through the use of a global command, glob for short. After reading in all this data and concatenating it, it's another programming term, I create a mega spreadsheet of all journal usage into one spreadsheet. If you can imagine, it's like before I used to just manually do this. I would copy and paste all the counter data from each spreadsheet and I'd put it into one single spreadsheet. And concatenating it does this all automatically through Python. So yes, this is it. And after I read in, sorry about that. After I read in my data, this is what I do to create one big spreadsheet for further data analysis. You can ignore the Rasowitz part. Like if you're interested in taking my code, this is the Rasowitz part, but this is where I concatenate all of my counter data. And yeah. So and going back to my Rasowitz workflow, this code creates this. It creates a list of all titles managed by Rasowitz that are going to be reviewed for the year. And this, I use a PD merge, a merge command to create this, to get this list. And it makes it it's a bit of a time saver for me because now I don't even have to guess where the journal title is or I have all the data that I need to fill out my Rasowitz spreadsheet. And at the end of the summer, this is what I produce. Although, I'm using visual colors to make it easier for my colleagues to read. I make special notes for myself, like I indicate where I got the usage number from, which helps me every year to figure out is this journal available in other in other platforms? And that's kind of my way of providing an overlap analysis. The spreadsheet also provides previous collection development notes that we've made the previous year. And again, this requires a lot of copying and pasting on my part. And there's potential to write a new script for this to make it a lot less intense, a lot less work for me. So when I'm done with Rasowitz, I can move on to ACRL IPEDS statistics. So in this situation, instead of finding individual usage for individual titles. I'm collecting usage across the entire vendor platform. So I can technically still use the existing data that I collected for harassment. And this is the code that I wrote with the assistance of GitHub's Copilot. I'll discuss this point at a later slide, but I wanted to show you the code I wrote to add up all the values using of my usage reports. I had already read in my data when I was working on harassment, and I might have to rerun the code again to read in more data as I'm collecting more usage. And I can now use the mega spreadsheet that I created in my data analysis to add up all my usage. And this is a number that I need to fill out the ACRL IPEDS report. This process used to be pretty tedious. I used to manually add in a formula to calculate the sum of all values using the metric type of unique item request for each single spreadsheet. And then I'd have to, keep track of all of that. Now I have a script that does it for me. And I still have to keep track of where I've gotten my reports, but I don't have to physically go into each spreadsheet and calculate the total number that way. So I can be sure that the number is correct. I didn't, forget to add up a number from one report. Like I can be pretty sure that it's as accurate as it can be, which is helpful. And now this code I wrote with the help of GitHub's Copilot. So I have a subscription to GitHub's Copilot. It uses ChatGPT's artificial intelligence to help you find coding solutions. Suffice to say, I'm barely able to write code. My library has an internal programmer, and shout out to David Palmquist. He helped me write all of the harassment code, and he recommended that I try out Copilot. And with my limited expertise in programming, like I've even gone to data carpentries, courses, boot camps. I was able to write the code here on my own. More importantly, I didn't have to anxiously ask for help from David, which I consider a success. I also have to give myself some credit. I figured out how to employ Copilot just enough to write my own code. I think that there's so much potential for using artificial intelligence to write code, and I'm barely scratching the surface. You need some basic knowledge of programming, and there are resources available out there. You just have to find them. And I've also overlooked a major detail in this presentation. I write my code using Visual Studio Code. It's a code editor, but I've struggled to learn this too. It's designed for programmers, so there are a lot of little details in its documentation that are missing for a non-programmer like me. And as promised, here's a link to my code that it's available here. Let me go back and let's see, go back. And thank you so much for attending my presentation. I appreciate your time and interest in coming here, and I hope this is helpful to somebody out there who works with counter reports, because I know that it's a really tedious and just soul crushing part of ERM work.
Thank
So
you. Yes, you're right, it is. And so thank you very much for sharing that and just for sharing your methods and for sharing your code. A really practical and helpful and timely presentation. I think a lot of people in the chat were talking about preparing for ACRL reporting. So thank you again. If anyone has any questions, please place them in the Q&A. I thought I saw one earlier, but now I'm not seeing it, so I'm guessing it was recent. Oh, well, now I see one again. Okay, we have a question. Anyone else, feel free to drop them in the Q&A as well. Our first question, we have Alma and use SUSHI to harvest usage data. However, I use usage stats for collections evaluation. If I understand correctly, there's no analytics report that reproduces counter reports. If there is one, please share. So I don't know if that's to you or to the larger audience, but if you
yeah,
can speak to that, feel free.
yeah, I think so. And that's something that I've been struggling with because I've come from I came from a library previously that used EBSCO's usage consolidation. And I feel like those reports that were produced using Sushi looked a lot like counter reports. So it made a lot of the data analysis that I was doing there a lot easier. And so like here with you have to run in analytics, and I think that there is a way, but I just can't think off the top of my head.
Yeah, thank you. I think some people are sharing some stuff in the chat. See, next question. Thank you. I will research this on my own. It's good to know that programming is needed to collate the information. So more of a statement, but agreed. Like I thought you sharing about the kind of AI resources to help you along with that code was really cool. I can relate to kind of not wanting to ask maybe like someone with more advanced knowledge that you might not want to just bother too much and you think I should be able to kind of get there and I just need a little boost so it's cool that those resources exist and thank you for sharing information about that. It's just really neat that you can make use of that to kind of automate all sorts of processes.
Yeah, and I want to touch on a comment by Martha Smith. Um, and she said she read the IPEDS instructions that refer like that tell you, oh, collect a TRJ1 and you know track the unique item requests like that. Um, but there's oh wait, no, and I guess I read the person wrong. My from Elizabeth York, ACRL says to use TRJ1, but then asks us to add OA access stats if OA content is discoverable, which it is. So TRJ1 plus OA is a TRJ3. So I think there's an issue with the ACR with the instructions coming from ACRL because they want us to include the open OA usage, and you can only get that through a TRJ3, and that's not available in a TRJ1.
Yeah, thank you. I personally have gotten confused reading the instructions and saying, "Wait, you want this, but you're asking for that." That's
Yeah,
interesting.
so that was a very anxiety producing moment when I was so close to collecting all my usage stats, and then I saw that and I was like, oh no, I did them wrong. But I did learn I can collect usage stats in a day when I'm very, very stressed out.
Oh, that's very cool. Our next question and comment. Love it. Can you share the code location again? I'm just getting started in
Oh,
Python, but see great value in this.
let me drop it in the chat. Let me see if I can
Thank you.
do that.
And
Okay.
also just for all the attendees out there, all of today's presentations, the slides and recordings and unanswered Q&As will all be provided to all attendees.
Yeah, and if anybody has questions about the code, I can I can help you with that a little bit. Um, One thing I've learned that it matters where your code lives in relation to your data. So like you can't just run code like you saw the screenshot where I had like all my usage files. Um, you can't put the code in that folder. You have to it has to live outside of that folder for it to do what you want it to do, like the concatenation. And I was able to troubleshoot that on my own. So I'm always very proud of myself when I figure things out on my own without having to call David for help.
All right, we have another question. Was Harasowitz helpful at all in this usage statistics gathering initiative?
um, well, see, the thing is there's a you can pay for a service where Harasowitz collects your usage statistics as as an extra fee. And so that's like we don't do that at the library. So it's I guess it's more cost effective to have us do it on our own. Um, so yeah, I hope that answered your question.
All right, thank you. We still have a couple minutes left if anyone has any more questions they'd like to add to the Q&A. We can, give it a minute or so and see if anything comes in. Also, people have been sharing, some information and resources in the chat throughout the day, and that will be I'll go through that and we'll pick out any links and whatnot that people have shared, and that will also be shared out in a week or two or possibly three once we send out all the information with the recordings and slides and etc. So we try to share as much as we can from what is shared here today so people can refer back and use it in their day to day. I see something in the comments right now, not to plug things too hard, but the Python for Lib group mentioned this morning is meant to be sort of a coffee shop chat for people of any skill level of Python in libraries. You can check out the Code for Lib Slack if you're on Slack, or email me, this is David Erlinson, at de12@rice.edu for an invite. And thank you for sharing that. I myself will be making use of that now. That's great to know. Um, oh, we do have one more question for Ilda. Are you open to mentoring someone new to usage statistics?
Yeah, yeah. Stephanie, my email is in the presentation, but I can drop it in the chat if you'd like some help.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And unless anyone has any more questions, I would just like to thank you again for this presentation. Again, really, really great practical stuff that I think is a lot of people here today are going to find helpful. So we appreciate you being here and being part of this conference. Thanks again.